A man stands before a firing squad. He has been told he will die in 3 minutes. The soldiers raise their rifles. He looks at the golden dome of a church gleaming in the morning sun and thinks, if I could live, if somehow I could escape this moment, I would turn every minute into an eternity. I would count every second. I would waste nothing, nothing. At the last instant, a messenger arrives. The execution is stopped. The man is pardoned. That man was Fyodor Dostoevsky, and he did not keep his promise. He later admitted that he wasted just as much time as anyone else, that the revelation faded, that ordinary life swallowed the extraordinary clarity of that moment before death. But he never forgot it, and everything he wrote afterward, every novel, every character, every exploration of the darkest corners of the human soul, was an attempt to understand why we fail to live even when we know how precious life is, why we destroy ourselves, why we hurt the people we love, why we choose suffering when happiness is within reach. If you've ever done something you knew was wrong and couldn't stop yourself, if you've ever sabotaged your own success, if you've ever felt that there's something broken inside you that no amount of achievement or love can fix, then Dostoevsky wrote about you. He understood you, and what he discovered might be the most honest and ultimately hopeful picture of human nature ever created. Stay with me for the next 20 minutes. This is going to be intense, but if you've ever wondered why being human is so hard, Dostoevsky has answers that no one else has dared to give. Before we go deeper, I need you to do something. If you've ever felt at war with yourself, if you've ever experienced that strange human capacity to want something and its opposite at the same time, leave a comment. I want to know I'm not speaking into the void. I want to know there are others who understand that being human is more complicated than the self-help books admit. Fyodor Mikhailovich Dostoevsky was born in Moscow in 1821. His father was a doctor at a hospital for the poor. Young Fyodor grew up surrounded by illness, poverty, and death. The patients his father treated were the forgotten people of Russian society, and Fyodor never forgot them. His mother died of tuberculosis when he was 15. His father, already a harsh and possibly abusive man, descended into alcoholism. 2 years later, his father was murdered by his own serfs, beaten to death in a field after years of cruel treatment. Imagine being 18 years old and learning that your father was killed by the people he had tyrannized. Imagine the complicated mixture of grief, guilt, and perhaps secret satisfaction that such news might bring. Dostoevsky never spoke publicly about his feelings, but the theme of fathers and sons, of patricide both literal and symbolic, would haunt his novels forever. He became a writer. His first novel was a success. Critics called him a new Gogol. He was young, talented, celebrated, and then at 27 he made a decision that would destroy his life and ultimately make him the writer we remember today. Dostoevsky joined a secret society. The Petrashevsky Circle discussed forbidden ideas, socialism, atheism, revolution against the Tsar. In the Russia of Nicholas I, such discussions were not merely illegal, they were suicidal. In 1849, the secret police arrested everyone involved. Dostoevsky was thrown into the Peter and Paul fortress, the most feared prison in Russia. For 8 months he sat in a tiny cell, not knowing if he would live or die. Then came the morning of December 22, 1849. The prisoners were taken to Semyonovsky Square. They were dressed in white burial shrouds. Priests offered last rites. The first 3 prisoners were tied to posts. Soldiers raised their rifles. Dostoevsky was in the second group. He had perhaps 90 seconds to live. And then, as I told you, the reprieve came. The execution was staged, a psychological torture designed by the Tsar to punish without creating martyrs. The real sentence was 4 years of hard labor in Siberia, followed by mandatory military service. That moment before the firing squad never left him. He would write about it repeatedly, the strange clarity, the way time seemed to expand, the golden light on the church dome, the absolute preciousness of every remaining second. And also the terrible knowledge that came after, the knowledge that such moments of clarity fade, that we return to our old ways, that even facing death cannot permanently transform us. Siberia broke Dostoevsky and remade him. 4 years in a prison camp, surrounded by murderers, thieves, and political prisoners, hard labor in freezing temperatures, chains on his legs, constant illness, no books allowed except the Bible, which he read obsessively. But something unexpected happened. Among the criminals, Dostoevsky found humanity. He discovered that the worst people were capable of moments of extraordinary goodness, that the human soul was not a simple thing, either good or evil, but a battlefield where both fought constantly. He wrote later that those years taught him to understand the Russian people, not the educated elite with their European ideas, but the common people with their faith, their suffering, their capacity for both cruelty and compassion. This understanding would transform his writing from talented social commentary into something much deeper, an exploration of the soul itself. When he emerged from Siberia after 10 years of imprisonment and exile, he was not the same man. The fashionable young writer who believed in reason and progress was dead. In his place was someone who had stared into the abyss of human nature and survived. Let me ask you a direct question, and I want you to think carefully before answering in the comments. Have you ever discovered something true about yourself that you wished you hadn't learned? A capacity for cruelty, jealousy, or destruction that shocked you? A moment when you realized you were capable of things you had always condemned in others? Dostoevsky would say that such moments of self-knowledge, however painful, are essential, because we cannot heal what we refuse to see. And the human capacity for self-deception is almost unlimited. After Siberia, Dostoevsky wrote the novels that made him immortal. Each one explored different aspects of the human condition with an honesty that still shocks readers today. In one novel, he created a character who believes that if God doesn't exist, everything is permitted. This character tries to prove his freedom by committing the ultimate transgression and discovers that the human conscience cannot be reasoned away. That guilt is not just social conditioning, but something deeper, something that pursues us even when we've convinced our minds that we've done nothing wrong. In another, he explored the psychology of a man who commits murder to prove a theory, believing himself to be extraordinary above ordinary morality. The psychological deterioration that follows, the way conscience manifests as physical illness, paranoia, and eventual confession, remains one of the most penetrating studies of guilt ever written. He created characters who represent pure goodness and explored how such goodness fares in a corrupt world. He created characters of pure spite who would rather suffer than accept help, who would destroy themselves just to prove their freedom. He created children who suffer and asked the question that has haunted believers ever since: how can a good God allow innocent children to suffer? If this video is touching something in you, if you feel that Dostoevsky is describing parts of yourself you rarely acknowledge, I need you to do something now. Like this video and subscribe to the channel, not for numbers, but because this message needs to reach others who are ready for this kind of honesty. And what comes next is where everything deepens. At the heart of Dostoevsky's vision is a profound understanding of human psychology that anticipated Freud by decades. He understood that we are not rational creatures who occasionally feel emotions. We are emotional creatures who occasionally rationalize. He understood the underground man, the person who knows what he should do but refuses to do it, specifically because he should. The person who would rather suffer than accept happiness that was given to him. The person who turns spite into a philosophy because admitting need would be too humiliating. Have you ever been offered help and refused it? Not because you didn't need it, but because accepting would wound your pride. Have you ever done something self-destructive just to prove that no one could tell you what to do? Have you ever chosen suffering over happiness because the happiness seemed too easy, too unearned, too much like admitting defeat? That's the underground, and Dostoevsky understood it because he lived it. He was a gambling addict. Despite his intellectual brilliance, despite knowing exactly what he was doing to himself and his family, he would lose everything at the roulette tables of European casinos. He would pawn his wife's clothes, beg for advances from publishers, plunge into desperate poverty, and then, the moment he had money again, return to the tables. He wrote about this addiction with devastating honesty, the strange pleasure of losing, the way the gambler is not really trying to win money but to feel alive, the perverse satisfaction of destroying yourself, of proving that you are the master of your own ruin. But Dostoevsky was not a nihilist. This is where many readers misunderstand him. He descended into the darkest places of the human soul, not to celebrate darkness, but to find the light that might still exist there. His answer was not reason. He had seen too much to believe that logic could save us. His answer was not progress. He had watched too many rational idealists become monsters. His answer was love, but not love as sentiment or feeling. Love as action. Love as suffering willingly accepted for another. Love as the choice to see the image of God in even the most degraded human being. He believed that beauty would save the world. Not aesthetic beauty, though he valued that, but moral beauty. the beauty of a person who forgives when they have every right to condemn, the beauty of compassion that doesn't ask whether the recipient deserves it, the beauty of faith that persists even when every rational argument points toward despair. Dostoevsky grappled with faith his entire life. He was not a simple believer. He knew every argument against God. He could articulate the case for atheism more powerfully than most atheists. His character Ivan presents the problem of suffering with such force that believers have been struggling to answer it for over a century. But Dostoevsky chose to believe, not because the arguments convinced him, but because he couldn't live without faith. He wrote that if someone proved to him that Christ was outside the truth, he would rather remain with Christ than with the truth. This might sound like willful blindness, but Dostoevsky meant something deeper. He meant that the highest truths are not accessed through argument, but through experience. That love is more real than logic. That the human need for meaning is not a weakness to be overcome, but a clue to the nature of reality. He had stood before the firing squad. He had suffered in Siberia. He had seen the worst of humanity and the worst of himself, and through all of it, something in him refused to accept that the universe was merely mechanical, that consciousness was just chemistry, that love was just evolutionary adaptation. Was he right? That's a question each of us must answer. But his faith was not naive. It was faith that had passed through the fire and survived. Second question for you. Do you believe that human beings are fundamentally good, corrupted by society, or fundamentally selfish, restrained only by fear? Or something more complex, a mixture of heights and depths that no simple formula can capture? Dostoevsky rejected all simple answers. He believed in original sin, in the human capacity for evil that exists before any social influence. But he also believed in grace, in the possibility of redemption, in moments when even the worst person can be touched by something higher. Write your thoughts in the comments, because wrestling with these questions is what it means to be human. Dostoevsky's final novel, which he considered his masterpiece, brought together all his themes: faith and doubt, fathers and sons, reason and passion, the existence of God, the nature of evil, the possibility of redemption. The novel centers on a father and his sons. The father is vulgar, selfish, a buffoon, yet somehow alive in a way that his more refined sons are not. Each son represents a different response to the chaos of existence: intellectual atheism, sensual surrender, spiritual seeking, hidden resentment. One character presents the most devastating critique of faith ever written, a chapter about the suffering of children that has brought believers to tears and to doubt. If God allows innocent children to be tortured, the character argues, then no amount of future harmony can justify it. He doesn't deny God's existence. He returns the ticket. He refuses to participate in a world built on such foundations. Another character represents faith, but not through argument, through presence, through listening, through the kind of attention that sees the suffering person as infinitely valuable. He doesn't refute the intellectual arguments against God. He embodies an alternative, a way of being in the world that makes those arguments feel somehow beside the point. The novel ends with a funeral and a promise. Children gather around a grave and pledge to remember the good, to be kind to each other, to hold on to the moments of connection that make life bearable. It's not a triumphant ending. The problems haven't been solved. The questions haven't been answered. But there's something there, a fragile hope. A suggestion that love, even when it can't explain suffering, can somehow redeem it. Dostoevsky died in 1881 at the age of 59. His funeral in St. Petersburg was one of the largest in Russian history. Tens of thousands followed his coffin through the streets. He had become more than a writer. He had become something like a prophet, a voice that spoke to the deepest questions of Russian and human existence. But his final years were marked by personal tragedy. His young son Alyosha died of epilepsy, the same disease that had tormented Dostoevsky himself since Siberia. He wrote some of his greatest pages while grieving this loss, pouring his anguish into fiction that could contain what life could not. On his deathbed, he asked his wife to read to him. She chose the parable of the prodigal son, the story of the father who welcomes back the child who had wasted everything, who had fallen into the depths, who had returned broken and ashamed. The father doesn't ask for explanations, doesn't demand repentance, simply embraces. Dostoevsky died believing in that embrace, whether it exists or not, whether his faith was true or not. He died with hope. So what does all this mean for you, watching this video? living in a world Dostoevsky could barely imagine yet somehow predicted. First, accept your contradictions. You are not a simple person. You are capable of love and cruelty, wisdom and stupidity, generosity and spite. The attempt to be only good, to deny the darkness in yourself, leads not to virtue but to hypocrisy or explosion. The saints that Dostoevsky admired were not those who had no evil in them, but those who acknowledged their evil and struggled against it daily. Second, beware of ideas that justify cruelty. Dostoevsky saw that the most dangerous people are not those who embrace evil openly, but those who commit evil in the name of good, the revolutionary who kills for the future paradise, the rationalist who sacrifices individuals for abstract principles. Every ideology that promises to solve the human problem by eliminating certain humans is a lie from the beginning. Third, choose love, even when it seems foolish. Dostoevsky knew that love is not rational. It cannot be justified by calculations of pleasure and pain. It often leads to suffering, but it is the only thing that redeems suffering, the only thing that makes life bearable, the only thing that connects us to something larger than our individual isolation. Fourth, face your death, not morbidly, not obsessively, but honestly. Let the awareness of your mortality clarify your priorities. Dostoevsky never forgot those minutes before the firing squad, even when he couldn't live up to what they taught him. The awareness of death, truly felt, reveals what matters. Final question. If you were standing before the firing squad, if you had only minutes to live and then were miraculously reprieved, what would you change about your life? What would you stop wasting time on? What would you finally say to the people you love? What would you stop postponing? Don't wait for the firing squad. It's coming anyway, just on an unknown schedule. Live now as if you've been reprieved. Because in a sense, every morning you wake up is exactly that, a reprieve you didn't earn, a gift of more time, an opportunity to live as if life is precious. Because it is. Before you go, I need you to do one thing. If Dostoevsky's vision touched something in you, share this video with someone who is struggling, someone who feels broken and doesn't know that their brokenness is part of being human, someone who needs to hear that the darkness in them doesn't disqualify them from love. And subscribe to the channel. We're going to keep exploring these deep questions, these writers and thinkers who went to the depths and brought back maps for the rest of us. This content takes time and care to create, and your subscription makes it possible. Dostoevsky lived a life of suffering, imprisonment, exile, poverty, addiction, loss. He saw the worst of himself and the worst of humanity. He descended into places that most people spend their lives avoiding. And he came back with a message. Not a simple message, not a comfortable message, but an honest one. We are broken, all of us. There is no fixing this brokenness through reason or progress or self-help. The darkness is real and it's inside us, but we are also capable of love, of beauty, of moments when we transcend our selfishness and touch something higher. These moments don't cancel the darkness, but they exist alongside it, and in the end, they might be what matters most. Dostoevsky didn't promise that everything would be okay. He didn't offer easy redemption or simple answers. What he offered was company in the depths, the knowledge that you are not alone in your struggles, that the greatest minds and souls have wrestled with the same demons, and he offered hope, not certainty but hope, the fragile, stubborn hope that beauty might save the world, that love might redeem suffering, that even in the darkest night there might be a dawn we cannot yet imagine. That hope kept him writing through poverty and illness and grief. That hope speaks through his pages to readers across centuries and cultures and languages, and that hope is offered to you now. Take it or leave it, believe it or doubt it, but at least you've heard it. From a man who stood before the firing squad and lived, who descended into the underground and emerged, who looked into the abyss of the human soul and refused to look away, and who in the end chose to believe that love is stronger than death. Now the choice is yours. What will you do with your reprieve?